Welcome to the Spiritual Principles Made Practical podcast. I'm your host, Scott Friedman, and today we're going to embark together on the possibly most exciting journey ever. The journey of accepting our talents more fully and taking ownership of those talents and employing those talents in a way that uplifts us and everybody else. And because example is the most powerful form of leadership, and because I need to do this as much as anybody, I'll be your example. So this morning I'm meditating on what talent do I have that I'm underestimating, that I'm not taking complete ownership of, and that I'm not using to benefit myself and others in as profound and uplifting manner as I could. And what I got is that I have the ability to communicate the benefits of win-win thinking, as well as being an inspiring example of elucidating how to make that transition from zero-sum to win-win thinking. I wrote a book entitled Transitioning from Zero-Sum to Win-Win Thinking. And so it's been, what will I say, around in my mind for a long time. And the belief, though, that I can actually do it has been difficult, right? So I keep sharing this, and people that hear it, like it and think about it and consider it and are attracted to this. And I need to, in all honesty, think that or acknowledge the thought that part of me thinks that I really don't have. I'm a good salesman, but I'm not that good a salesman, right? I can sell a lot of things, but I'm not sure I can sell that to the world in a way where the dominant thinking becomes win-win, and that we take responsibility for ourselves, right? And we don't blame other people. So right now, with the dominant thinking in the world is the way I perceive it, at least. And I'm, here to tell you, other people can perceive it differently, and that's fine. But the way I perceive it, with the wars and the crime and the corruption and the problems that the world has, and for sure the world has a lot of things that are right. But in terms of a lot of political leadership and stuff, there's a whole lot of blaming going on, right? So if you have a problem, it's the immigrants' fault. And before that, it was the Jews' fault. And before that, it was the Italians' fault. And before that, it was, the Indians. And before that, it was like, blaming other people just doesn't work out. And the reason it doesn't work out is because it's a denial of our own abilities and capacity to create the wonderful, joyful, happy, fulfilling life that we all desire for ourselves. And blaming other people has never worked in creating that life and never will. And so there you go, right? I mean, like everybody else, I had parents, and like everybody else, my parents did some things right and did some things wrong, right? But running around my entire life blaming my parents for the things that they could have done better isn't helping me any, right? That what helps me more is to say, I'm an adult and I dealt with things however I had to as a child, and that's done. And now as an adult, it's on me to make choices that are good choices, and I'm responsible, and it doesn't make my life any better by blaming my parents for whatever mistakes they have made. And just like it's not a panacea, crediting my parents for the things that they did really, really well, for me, which were numerous. So But the point is that even though part of me thinks that I don't really have the communication skills to create acceptance of win-win thinking being a viable option to solve every problem, even though I don't necessarily think that I have the ability to communicate that in a way in which people pick it up and carry it and it becomes the dominant thinking in the world. I am inspired to do that. My inspiration is at odds with that thought. My inspiration is I do have the ability to do that. And so I have a choice, right? So I have two thoughts. So one thought is I have the ability to advance win-win thinking in the world to the point where it's the dominant thinking in the world, and the world is just immeasurably a better place as a result. That I have the ability to do that, and I need to get out there and use that ability. And the other thought is that I don't have the ability, and it's a waste of time, and nobody's going to listen to it anyway, and it's not going to make any difference. And so why even try? And here's the real kicker, as I've been getting ready to record this podcast and so forth, is that believing in myself enough to try, just that alone, regardless of whether it goes anywhere or not, regardless of whether you're inspired to share your win-win story and to look for more win-win solutions in your life, regardless of whether or not that happens, the fact that I'm here, I'm recording this podcast, I believe in my ability enough to at least give it a shot, right? The thought that this is a waste of time, don't do it, didn't win, right? I didn't choose that thought. I didn't choose to say, forget it, I'm not recording this podcast, it's not going to make any difference, right? I said, well, I believe in myself enough to at least record the podcast, to give it a shot. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Even that's an improvement over where I started of like, this is like a complete waste and don't do it. But it's exhilarating for me to even try. It's exhilarating because here's part of what's true for me, and I think for everybody, is that anytime that I do anything that is part of me believing in myself more, that I end up believing in myself more. And that's the determinant, right? So if I totally believe without reservation of any kind whatsoever that I have the ability to lead the world into a greater acceptance and utilization of win-win thinking to the point where that was the dominant thinking in the world, if I believe that with no doubt whatsoever, I can guarantee you that it would take place. Absolutely 100% guarantee you it would take place. So anytime that I act on that thought, my belief in that grows stronger. Okay, so it's not total yet. So I still have this part that is like hanging back saying, yeah, I don't think so, you know, that's pie in the sky stuff, right? And it's like, yeah, I accept that that part's there. And you know what? I'm recording this podcast anyway. And you know what? I'm going to work on starting a business, coaching and supporting people and identifying and implementing win-win solutions in their life. And you know what? I'm going to just keep plugging away on this. And because every time that I make an attempt, my faith and belief in my ability to succeed at this grows. And when my faith and belief in my ability to succeed at this grows to a certain point, it will happen. Now, maybe I'll die first, you know, who knows, right? But how I feel recording this podcast now compared to the dread and the discouragement and the hopelessness that I felt when I woke up this morning and earlier this morning before I recorded this podcast is miles apart from how inspired I am sharing with you my most recent attempt to move win-win thinking to be the dominant thinking in the world forward. And just the exhilaration that you see that I'm experiencing as I'm sharing this with you as payment enough. That's reason enough for me to do this podcast. And so it's like, if you act on your belief in yourself, just that action will increase your belief in yourself and lift you up some. And I want to be an example of that for today, where I started out in the dumps. And I meditated, and because I had yesterday gotten in my meditation that the thing that I need to do now is to take greater ownership of my skills and abilities and to use them more effectively for my and other people's benefit. And that every day I would get some inspiration about what I could do that would result in me accepting more of my talents and abilities and using them to uplift myself and others more. And so then even though I was down in the dumps, I still sat down, I still did my meditation, I still got this idea that I have communication skills. I can do this. I understand about the uplifting nature of being an inspiring example. I mean, I love to quote the story of Roger Bannister when people thought no human being could run a mile in under 4 minutes. And then all of a sudden, Roger Bannister runs the mile in under 4 minutes. And then, bam-o! All these other runners say, well, gee, if he could do it, I could do it. And they started doing it all over the place. Once the belief that it was impossible was shattered, then other people said, if he could do it, I can do it. Right? And so I want to be that inspiring example. I'm just a guy that, started out afraid of women and zero emotional intelligence and no social skills. And I just kept at it, right? I just kept at it. I was afraid all the time. I'm still afraid, although I have to tell you, I've gotten used to being afraid, so it doesn't trip me up as bad. So I can go, oh, well, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway, kind of thing. and I'm used to that and so on. But yeah, I'm an example of somebody who's consumed with fear, who said, you know what? I'm going to either have to act in spite of this fear or I'm going to have no life. So that's my choice. And I'm going to choose to accept the fears there and do it anyway. And we've all heard the admonition, feel the fear and do it anyway, right? But that's not enough. We need like people telling their stories, right? Of like how I, was so frightened when I started out in my first sales call, and I had to tell myself over and over again, you're only 21 years old, no one expects you to know anything, everything, just to get out of the car, right? And how when I showed up, that it was it was a huge act of courage just to show up, because I was just petrified. And then what happened is like chokes me up to this day. I was just met with unimaginable kindness. The purchasing agents that I was calling on carried the conversation and helped me and were accepting of me just as I was, and just the kindness of others was just so, to this day, shocking and overwhelming to me in the best of ways. And I want to return that favor and measure to the world, because the suffering that would end with making win-win thinking the dominant thinking in the world. It's hard to imagine. how much joy and love and healing would accompany that. When I look at the impact that people's kindness has had on me, and I say, you know, there's an opportunity to share my wisdom and my kindness in a way that will help people experience that and more. It's a deep and powerful motivator for me. I want people to feel that the healing of that kindness that I've experienced. I want to be able to offer that. And believe me, I know that selling people on the idea that there's a win-win solution to every problem will create that healing and more that I was the beneficiary of from people's kindness. The times when I've identified win-win solutions, it has opened my heart, enriched my life amazingly. And I want to share that with people all I can. When people are having difficulties, I want to be able to be that loving acceptance that I felt from those purchasing agents. I want to be that guy. And then I have been that guy a lot. And I want to build on that. And I believe that the healing involved in identifying and implementing win-win solutions a centerpiece of our thinking and our efforts will dramatically improve our lives and the lives of everyone on this planet beyond, if there is a beyond. So that's what I'm inspired to do, and I hope my openness and sharing my story of how I'm doing my best to accept my ability to communicate effectively and to use that and my ability to inspire with my example and use that of helping you enrich your life too. But even if it doesn't, at least me making the effort to do that has enriched my life. And I believe that there's just no way possible that if I do something to enrich my life, that it doesn't enrich yours too. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I'm available, actually, if you want to work with me on identifying and implementing win-win solutions and working on your thinking, you know, transitioning our thinking from zero-sum to win-win thinking. You know, I mean, I really highly recommend, you know, my book, you know, just because it gives examples in there, and it's a good aid for people that do want to transition from zero-sum to win-win thinking. That book's available on Amazon. You can find a link to it on my website, where there's links to all my books on my website, which is www.thoughtcoachingbyscott.com. And if you want to email me and set up, you know, an effort to advance win-win thinking in your life and the world, email me at scottfriedman40@gmail.com. That's SCOTTFRIEDMAN40@gmail.com. I don't know that there's anything that we could do that would have a more powerful and uplifting impact in the world than being present, allowing win-win thinking to be a dominant part of our thinking and the focus of our attention. And so if that's something that you would like to participate with me in, let me know and we'll figure out a way to make that happen. All right.